The first place we stayed when we got to Baghdad was the zoo over in the compound where the two big swords where Saddam Hussein was.
Wow, you were
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yep.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
By the
where we
by the
stayed.
teardrops, right?
Yeah, we stayed. Yep, we stayed there, and we stayed in actually in the zoo part. We had to set booby traps because the tigers and lions had escaped from the zoo.
I
Wow,
heard some of the animals were starving. I heard
What?
stories
that's
about the
Yeah.
zoo.
crazy.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, Legends of the Fall, where we are celebrating our 25th anniversary, Fall 97. And we're commemorating this 25th anniversary celebration with a series of podcasts talking about different subjects, life subjects that apply to those who have been in the 100, yes, but more specifically that are a little bit more akin to the fall of 97. And in this special episode, we're calling this our veterans episode. Gotta salute the veterans. They take a major uh risk. They sacrifice so much so that we can walk around in the streets and we can feel safe in our homes. We can go to the stores and whatnot. So Carmen, I'm gonna go ahead and pass the ball to you because you're a veteran. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh-huh. She told listen, everybody, she told me I was a little bit late coming on. She told me drop and give up 25. Well, I tell you that I love my French sister, but she said drop and give me 25. I was like, oh snap, let me start giving
If
some
you're
push-ups.
early, you on time. If you're on time, you're late.
I know. Yeah. I couldn't have made it in the military. That's why I'm in the private sector now. Go ahead, Carmen, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, Tracy. So this episode, I want to introduce two of our freshman brothers. Well, before I start with introducing them, I'll just share my own path into the military. We talked about it before with the last episode, but ROTC, Army ROTC, is what funded my path into FAMU. And so for me, I always knew, once I finished my scholarship, that that's where I was heading, off onto active duty. But after our time at FAMU, eventually we had a few other freshman brothers. Two of our other freshman brothers joined the military. I think we have a total of four, if I'm not mistaken. And so
Yeah.
we took some interesting paths. Our paths to the military were different, and then we went on different paths within the military throughout our years of service. And so I just wanted to take this time to really just, tell our stories, tell what we did, tell our experiences, because throughout the 100, even before us, long history of military service. And even before that, just with marching band in general, band started as a way for military formations to communicate with each other. Those are some of the origins of band. And so it's always been a part of the history of FAMU, and it's evolved over time. So military service, service in the 100, the pomp, the circumstance, the discipline, all of that, it's always been, just a part of our culture. So I thought, hey, what better way than to talk about our experiences as the class of fall 97 and what our experiences looked like in the 100. All right, so we're introducing Kareem Leneman and Tory Henderson. Kareem, we'll start with you. Tell us where you came from and what instrument do you play?
I came from Suncoast High School in Riviera Beach, Florida, and I played the sousaphone while I was at FAMU.
All right, Hubba Kareem and Tori, introduce
So
yourself.
hello, thank you for having me. I come from FAMU High, which is in Tallahassee, Florida, which is on the down part of the hill, and I played percussion while I was in the 100.
All right, Hubba Tori.
How about
So
Tori?
So tell me, for both of you, what made you choose the instrument that you chose? How did you become a tuba player? How did you become a percussion player?
Well, my path. This is Kareem speaking. My path was a little interesting because I originally started playing the trumpet in eighth grade. So a close friend of the family gave my mother a trumpet when I was in middle school, and I started playing in eighth grade. And when I went to high school, that was really my introduction into a high stepping band or black style or HBCU style marching bands. Because my band director, Mr. Ernest Brown, went to Florida University as well. He was in 100. He was a drum major as well. So I started off playing the trumpet, and we didn't have any tuba players my junior year, and he asked me if I was willing to switch over to sousaphone for the band because we kind of needed the help. And from there, it's somewhat stuck. I really enjoyed it more than playing trumpet, and I decided not to go back and just stay on the sousaphone. So kind of an interesting transition to playing tuba.
Well,
Interesting.
I could
And how about
say
you,
for
Tori?
me, I could say for me, my path was less interesting. As soon as I saw percussion, I knew that's what it was for me. Um, in high school, we had a director that was from the hundred as well, Mr. Arnett Moore. But it was just even in high school, I played more than just drums. Played marimba, xylophone, and things of that nature. But it was never a choice to switch to anything else for me.
I got a
Awesome.
question. Can I think it right? Tori, what was it like going to FAMU High? Like what was that like? Like the high school that belonged to FAMU. Like what were there perks involved with that? Like what was that experience like?
Um, the perk to that was actually the experience. Just being that close to it, I think that's what helped me in the hundred, being able to watch that every week. Take it right down the street to my own band. Um, another perk was people interning from the hundred would come down to the school. So we got a lot of experience that people would have to wait either for that band director to come to that band or wait for homecoming to come see the hundred. We got that experience all the time. Even the college experience, we already knew what we were going to do.
Awesome. Awesome. Because
That's cool.
reason
I
why
never thought about that experience. You had it. It was there. It was always there. It was a part of your high school experience.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even down to the uniforms, hand me down uniforms. We
I remember that.
we we
That was
got we
the
got
reason
all
why.
family stuff. Like we wore. I'm pretty sure our drum majors wore uniforms that 70s drum majors was wearing. So, but it was a beautiful experience. I wouldn't, you know, our band wasn't very big, but I wouldn't change the experience for anything in the world. Um, it was just I think that was the upside to it, just being right there to watch it, to hear it. We could walk up to the band field and listen to band practice, things of that nature. So I fell in love with the sound even before I could even be in the high school band. You know, the symphonic sound like that was in my head before I even touched college ground.
Mm.
Awesome.
Awesome sauce.
So pivoting over to, we'll shift and kind of start talking about what were the first inklings or the first decisions where you thought about military service may be a path for you, or how did you fall into your military service?
Well, another thing that was never my idea. So my mother decided that it's funny. The military was for me. One Saturday morning, I woke up and there were like recruiters in our living room that she called because
Oh, wow.
she never thought she never thought I was going to go to college. So she said, you know what, I need a backup plan, and you're going to do this military thing whether you like it or not. So I remember one Saturday morning, I woke up and there were some recruiters in the living room, and we were talking about the military. Although I always planned on going to school, and I ended up keeping, making a decision if I wanted to go into the Marines or if I wanted to go into the Army. And before I got accepted to FAMU, I actually joined the National Guard Reserves. I would say the January of my senior year before I got my acceptance letter because I wasn't sure if I was going to college. But I wasn't going active duty. I decided, what, I'll keep my options open. Maybe I'll go to community college and I'll do the the reserve contract versus the active duty contract. And but really, the reason I went into the military was because of my mother. Thinking that I needed a backup plan, which actually worked out for me.
And that is interesting how we took similar paths. Same thing in the
Mm.
fall of 1996, going into my senior year. My mom was like, I don't have it. I don't have the finances for you to go to school. I know you want to go to FAM, but we can't pay for you to go to FAM. So these are the options. And so I had a long history of military going all the way back World War II. I've always had someone in my family has served. And so it was just that
Uh,
next logical decision, like this is a path or this is a tool. And so same thing, enlisted senior year and actually started going to drill, going to duty during my senior year of high school. Thought I was rich because I was getting a little bit of pay once a month. They couldn't tell me nothing back then.
it couldn't tell you anything with those benefits, huh?
Right. But somehow I ended up getting a packet for Army ROTC. And so it went from me, going and just being a reservist to actually looking at, hey, you can go to school full time and they'll pay for everything. And so once I saw that opportunity, it was off to the races. And so the rest is history. So how about you,
Wow.
Tori? What was your path in?
Oh, so mine was a little different. Um, I knew I was when I graduated high school. I knew I was going to FAM. I knew I was going to March. Went up to FAM, did that 97 and 98, and then of course college experiences. My oldest son came, and it was just time for me to change directions. And at the time in Tallahassee, it was really nothing I could do really to support my son. So it just all happened all at once. That 9/11 and then the time I enlisted, I ended up just saying, I'm about to go to the army. I need a check. I got to support my son, and that's what I did.
Okay, so I can see how we all had, just different paths. We all ended up in the Army, but just different ways. So Kareem served Florida National Guard. Tori, you enlisted, and you said was it before or after 9/11?
It was actually like 9/11 had just happened. When my son, no, yeah, 9/11 had just happened when my son came, and I remember the news, everything being on the news or whatever. But it was one of them things. Of course, you got friends like, "Hey, I don't think this is the right time to do this," and I'm like, "Well, I have a child, so it is what it is."
Right. And one thing too, for both of you is, do you think the 100 influenced your, I guess, either the way that you served or how did your experience marching in the 100 play into your service?
Well,
That's an interesting question.
Or did it? Did it
I,
have any
I
impact
would
on your service?
I would say that that's interesting. For me, it was a little bit of a conflict because when I actually went to basic training before the fall where we came up, so I missed pre-drill because I was in basic training, and then came late, pretty much right before school started. And I had a large conflict throughout a lot of my time in the military because uh, it would conflict with the drill weekends where I had to drill 1 week a month at the Tallahassee unit. but I would say that maybe some of the military impacted my discipline in the hundred. I was disciplined in high school, but I think it may have been other way around, where some of the military discipline impacted some of my work ethic and discipline when I was in the hundred, for sure.
So a little bit before, it's because I didn't even know that. I didn't know that you enlisted and went to basic prior. So that in some ways could have prepared you for the 100. Makes sense.
Yeah, I
How
enlisted
about you, Tori?
before I graduated. I joined, and basically my contract was set to go to basic training upon graduation. And I did actually even more weird. I did a split op. I did a split op training. So I did basic training the summer before my freshman year and the summer before my sophomore year while at FAMU.
And I've heard about that program. That's actually what I was gonna go into if I had went that route, but ROTC ended up just funding all of it.
Oh.
So how about you, Tori? Do you feel that the your time in the 100, did it influence or impact your service at all?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. For me, I didn't join the military until after my 100 days. So uh it definitely gave me a feel. I mean, like coming up in 100, you'll never forget it. Like the most grand memory I have of the 100 is like your freshman brothers and your freshman sisters. So you don't know what's gonna happen, but at the end of the day, you got people going through with you. So it was like that same impact going into the army and operations and doing that. It's just like you had to create that trust, and you had to use discipline. And I think the 100 started that for me. But I think the military took it a little farther for me as well. But the 100 definitely had a positive impact on me as far as transitioning into the military.
It's good to know. And what I love about this podcast is even though we've known each other, all four of us, we have known each other since the fall of 97, we're still learning about each other. Those are just things that I didn't know. So yeah, that's cool. So let's shift over to one thing that we always talk about, and for the podcast listeners is I think it sounds like for all of us at some point we all did spend some time on active duty or either got mobilized. But there was a time at the beginning of the war, when we say the beginning of the war, we're all referring to the initial invasion of Iraq. So, to take it back, September 11th, 2001, that happens. For those of us that served in the military, we all knew that at some point, we would all be deployed or go to war. And whatever that looked like, we didn't know what it would look like. But fast forward to March of 2003, all three of us ended up all in Kuwait in preparation for the war. So, Kareem, do you want to talk about? Do you remember that day that we ran into each other before the war started?
I remember that day, and it was crazy because I was on my way out. So, September 11th happened, 2002. I was on a bus to Fort Stewart by the end of December 2002. So the Tallahassee National Guard unit, Tallahassee's a college town, which everyone knows. So that Tallahassee National Guard unit was an 11 Bravo infantry unit, and it was stacked full of guys from prior service Marine Corps, prior service Ranger Bat, and active duty Army infantry. So we got plugged in immediately as an infantry filler because at the time the military was somewhat caught off guard. It was a little downsized and not necessarily ready for combat. So this is the first time I think, I can't remember specifically. I think they said within a few decades where the National Guard was actually called up and activated. So with that Tallahassee infantry unit, third battalion, 124th infantry, was actually plugged into third ID, right? So we got plugged into third ID, and by the end of December, we were headed to Fort Stewart for processing to head in country. So our unit was there from December 2002 to March '04. So when I saw you guys in March, I was in the initial wave with Third ID moving behind, I believe it was 82nd Airborne to Baghdad. And
Wow.
then we were coming out as first, I believe it was first armored. I can't remember. Somebody correct me later on, but I think it was first armored
First
that was
Armored
taking over the
Division.
country. Yeah, they were taking over the country. Third ID was going home. First Armor was taking over. So we were able to exit with Third ID. When I saw you guys, I was on the way out, and you guys were on the way
Wow. And I didn't know that. So the crazy part is coming out of FAM, April 28th, 2001, I commissioned through ROTC.
out.
They swore you in during the graduation ceremony. 24 days later, I'm on active duty, at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. So I went to the officer basic course. So 5 months, fast forward, September 11th happens while I'm in school, then report to Fort Stewart, October of 2001. So not knowing Kareem was at Fort Stewart 2 months after I was. We didn't even know that Kareem was there. Tory
Wow.
also was stationed at Fort Stewart. Tory and I ran into each other one day at the DFAC. So DFAC for civilian listeners is dining facility. So one
Yep.
morning I'm eating breakfast with my fellow officers. I hear somebody say, Carmin, Carmin. And so of course the officer's looking at me like, who's this soldier that you know? Who do you know? And I'm like, no, y'all don't understand. This is my freshman brother, Tory. And so, Tory, when did you arrive at Fort Stewart?
So I arrived in Fort Stewart in July of 2003. No,
Okay.
2002. Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, I was gonna say it
2002.
had to be '02, cause right, we didn't
And then
cross the line
um, we
until
actually we actually went to Kuwait. We were supposed to go to Kuwait for 6 months, but that was like the draw up for everything. So
okay,
in that 6 months, we learned there that it's either we were gonna be going back home after that, or we were gonna be going across the border, which
okay.
ended up going across the border, which extended us another 6 months, which was our first tour. But I didn't know Kareem was attached to Fort Stewart because that was my
I didn't know
active
that
duty.
either. So
Um,
he had the third ID patch, Kareem?
unit.
So we had, interestingly enough, some of us had a third ID
No,
patch, and then
they probably had the 82nd because we all fell under the 82nd.
we all fell
Ah,
on the 82nd. But so what our job was, interestingly enough, um, Desert Storm One, the Patriot battery was essentially in the rear, and they were shooting, they were shooting at the Scuds, or they were poised to shoot at the Scud missiles from miles from the rear. So what they decided to do with Desert Storm 2 is essentially they wanted to move the Patriot battery all the way to Baghdad, right? So as most people know in the military, the Army, if you're a Marine, everyone's a combatant, but in the Army, everyone's not a combat troop. So essentially our job, the infantry unit from Tallahassee, our job was to escort the non-combat unit Patriot battery up through the desert all the way up to Baghdad because they wanted the Patriot battery to be right near the launch space of those Scud missiles in case they went off.
okay,
So we actually wore the Patriot the Patriot battery emblem just to kind of fit in with those guys, but we're
okay.
technically attached with Third ID.
Interesting. So I arrived
We,
October '01. Kareem arrives December '02. I'm sorry, December '01. Tory arrives July '02.
Right.
So
So to
fast
go
forwarding
back
to
to
go ahead, Tori.
on your story when I saw you. So at that point we are our unit is in Fallujah. They done got Fragos to go to Fallujah.
ooh, I thought 101st went to Fallujah. Oh no,
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 they sent us
82nd.
they sent us over there because at the time, initially the Marines was over there
Yeah.
and things had got bad. so they fraggled us to Fallujah, but I was on heavy engineer equipment, so that they even though they fraggled us to send us that way, they sent all our heavy equipment back down to Kuwait, which was we were supposed to prepare to get ready to get out of there.
Uh,
And for
So
civilian listeners, FRAGO is short for fragmentary order. It basically means change of plans.
right.
And
Forget what
so
I said
that what
and
that
before.
and
means is
and,
that right, you had an initial
and that
mission, but higher comes down and says, "Hey, change of mission, do this, or you're going here." And so
and
Tory had to make
and at
the
that time,
adjustment.
just for people that don't know, at that time, Fallujah was like the south side of Chicago. So I'm glad I didn't
Yeah,
go
It was
to
hot.
yeah.
It was hot.
It was
No
bad. It
doubt
was
about
bad. That's why they started repositioning people to go back out there. So they sent me back to Kuwait with the vehicles I was driving at the time. And that's when I'm on the tent pad and I see my freshman sister Carmin. And then at first I'm like, man, she looks familiar. You know what I'm saying? I was like, that gotta be her. I'm about to try it. That's why I yelled her name. I'm like, Carmen. And she turned around and it was just like it was crazy. It was so good to see somebody there, you know what I'm
Yes.
saying,
Oh
that you
my
knew like
goodness.
that. It
Because
was
we,
it was really
thousands of
crazy.
miles from home, thousands of miles from home,
Thousands.
didn't know, like the old cadence, don't even know if I'm ever coming home. We didn't know what we were walking into, didn't know if
yeah.
we were going to survive it. So to see my freshman brother in Kuwait, we about lost it. I mean, you should, that picture, that smile that was it. It was all of my teeth. You could see every last one of my teeth. But yeah, it was a good feeling. And
So you
same
had
for
the whole
Kareem.
32 going, Carmen? You had the whole
Yes,
32 showing? Okay.
every last one. And same with Kareem. What are the odds? That literally,
What were the
Tracy,
odds?
this is the day before the war started. I'm in line at the post exchange buying my last few supplies.
But
Literally
even
the
with
day before.
Kareem,
Email deliver
you
about
you know
delivery
how I
load.
knew you knew how I knew Kareem was overseas?
How?
Facebook. And Facebook, he had posted this little picture sitting on his vehicle and stuff. I was like, Kareem over here? I was like,
You
man, I
didn't
hope I
know?
see him. But I never did. But that's how I found out he was overseas.
Wow. So
Uh,
I must have not told. I guess I never told you when I ran into you.
No, nope.
Maybe I
and when
didn't.
I saw you, it was almost like a little. It was almost like a reality warp because when you're deployed, it's like you're in a different world, and the real world seems like a distant life that you never really
Yes.
lived. It was kind of like a dream. So when I saw you, I was like, "Oh shit!" I mean, excuse me. It kind of brought me back to. I was like, "Wow, the real," kind of brought me. It was almost like a reality trip because at that point, the year was so long for me. I felt like my time in 100, the life that I left, it was almost like a distant memory. And all I knew at that point was deployment. It was crazy.
That's a good, I never
I
thought of it
definitely
that way. That right, right. It was like a tie, a connection between your previous life and real life.
Yeah,
Because the same thing, Kareem, is I thought
and
about you.
home.
'Cause I
And
remember you
home,
said you were going
period.
forward
Just
in
like
Route
yeah,
knowing
4. And I was like,
yeah.
dang, Kareem is up there. He's forward.
Because
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 my
because
unit, we
people,
were logistics. So
yeah,
we
because this was
provided
like this was
all the like supplies, any vehicle that broke down, we were responsible for repairing it, getting it back on the road. So that whole time I'm thinking, wow, Kareem is up there. He's already forward fighting. But
and
yeah,
that's a
I
dangerous
never
job,
thought of
right?
it that
Because
way.
you guys are like, that's a dangerous job. People will hear that and they're like, "Oh, that's not dangerous." That's a dangerous job because you're running those roads and you're running routes, right? And at that point, especially in Baghdad, those routes were very dangerous because of the IEDs and the groups that were trying to disrupt, those that
and it,
sort of support.
and it
And
was
this is
very little
before, yeah,
intelligence
and
at
this
that
is
time.
absolutely, and this is before really. I remember I think we used to have like MySpace pages or like Black Planet. So this is really before Facebook really dug
Before
in.
all that,
So yeah, so you're not really aware. There's not really. I think digital cameras just came out. So you really don't know. There was really not the connectivity that we have today in terms of being able to keep in contact with people.
So literally just the odds of us crossing paths. I mean, a
Yeah, it
million
was
to one, but we all
a
saw each
million to
other
one.
over there. So every year, Veterans Day, we always take that time and tell that story. And even just with the larger 100, there were others that were deployed too. And so I hope too that this discussion will just spur others, because there's a picture, I can't remember who all went, but there's this picture that comes up every year for Veterans Day, where there's like 3 or 4 members of the 100 that marched in Desert Storm. I think there was a
Hmm.
couple of drum majors, and they brought it down on the patch in uniform afterwards. So that
Yep.
legacy is there. We've always had members of the 100 that have served. And I'll be remiss too. Something that just came to mind too was upperclassman fall '95. I will always remember him because as we left, his unit was one of the units that replaced us was Sergeant Edmund Randall. Fall
Mm-hmm.
'95 trumpet. We all were there in the beginning of the war in 2003. His unit arrived, if I'm not mistaken, in the early parts of '04. So we missed him not even maybe by 6 months, but the times that we went home and the time that his unit arrived. And so for a long time, I used to struggle just with that, the thought that I knew what was coming because we knew what we had just left. And I always
Hmm.
thought about whoever's coming after us, it's not going to be sweet. They going to have a road ahead of them. And
Yeah,
so
because
that's the
we came
struggle.
in there
Go ahead,
and start,
Kareem.
and I'm so thankful. Knowing what I know now, if you were there early, that was the time to be there because we came in, we shocked the infrastructure, and once the dust settled, that's when the danger really started, right, with the occupation. And once we started having developing routines, and you became really literally, if you think about it, a lot of units across the country just became sitting ducks, and that's when it became dangerous. So I was, in hindsight, you know, yeah, I'm definitely thankful that although it was scary being part of the forward movement, that I was able to get out of country in 2004 when it really got bad.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
I deployed 4 times with the third ID,
Uh,
and I remember going over there my second tour and learning through the internet. Um, I always knew who Edmund Randall was, but I didn't know what happened as far as the military. So I learned that on my second tour. So of course I was shook, about that or whatever. But going over there 3 more times after the initial push, it really became a thing where it's just like you want to make it out of this. Um, it's you're not going through it alone, and you got people at home that's rooting for you. You got people that even in the 100 that march right beside you going through the same thing. So that
Yes,
kind of picked me up to put me in a certain position to just keep a tough mind frame going through those operations. And it's something you'll never forget. It's something you'll never forget.
truly, truly, never forget. And speaking of that, Tori, that brought up a memory. What you just said was our first deployment, and as Kareem said too, no connectivity. This was before really cell phones, so it was old school. So really just mail was the main way that we
yep.
received information from our family and friends. And so fall '97, I still have the letters that everybody wrote me during the deployment. I have a letter from Caralda, Hubba Caralda. I have a letter from my freshman sis Amanda. I have a letter from Glenn. Glenn sent me a picture of himself gushing in a parade and was like, "Freshman sis, looking out for you, just let you know we got you." So, but that is just the magic of our class, that they took the time. Oh, and Kawanza, I remember receiving a letter from her too, but just the fact that my freshman brothers and sisters, that they, knowing that you, far from home, whole nother life, you're just trying to get through it and go home, but then you get letters, from your freshman brothers and sisters. So stuff like that is what kept me going. The fact that those bonds, they supersede the band, they carried over, and having that support there with us even during wartime, I mean, it's priceless. So we'll have to post those letters so everybody can
But
see.
you got to remember,
Go ahead, Tori.
you have to remember, like going through those times, everything really slowed down. So even though we was ahead of technology at that point, that mean the letters took four weeks to get to you. Uh,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying? We were calling from rotary phones
Oh my
to
goodness.
connect to the post to for them to
To
call
patch you
somebody
through.
for us. It was a real crazy experience. I wouldn't. Sometimes when you're going through stuff, you be like, I can't believe I'm going through this, but at the same time, you like, I wouldn't change it for the world because it just builds something in you that you can't experience nowhere else. But it was
Definitely.
crazy, like you get on that phone, you like want to talk forever. Those phone cards run out quick. You like hoping the phone don't cut off on you because you done ran out of minutes. You be like, I hope they don't think I just hung up. It was crazy, but I'll never forget it though.
Yeah, it was
Definitely.
crazy because when I got in country, there was no infrastructure yet, so we came across the border up through Nasiriyah, and I remember when I first got to Baghdad. At that point, I think I'd been gone for about 50 days, and none of us had called home. So we just got
Hmm.
to Baghdad, and our unit. This is before they kind of secured the airport, so we took over this old officers compound in the city close to the College of Law, and I think it was I forgot the time difference. It was maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for me, and there's a kid on the street with a satellite phone, selling. I think he was charging $10 a minute US, and I and I
We
had cash on me that I had before we deployed. I spent $100 to talk to my mom from
Wow.
um from from a kid on a small Iraqi kid on the street with a satellite phone and sat cards. It was insane.
we had a reporter with us that had a satellite phone.
Oh,
We when
nice,
we
very nice.
when we first went through the border, we ended up taking our vehicles to a Iraqi car wash, and we was using his phone. He was reporting for us and everything. The first place we stayed when we got to Baghdad was the zoo over in the compound where the two big swords where Saddam Hussein was.
Wow. You were
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yep. We were
Yeah,
Wow.
by the tip,
that's
by the
where we
by the
stayed.
teardrops, right?
Yeah, we stayed. Yep, we stayed there, and we stayed in the zoo part. We had to set booby traps because the tigers and lions had escaped from the zoo.
I
Wow,
heard some of the animals were starving. I heard
What?
stories
that's
about some
Yeah.
animals.
crazy.
And then eventually, they got us a little PX semi truck back. You know what I'm saying there, and we was able to get stuff. And eventually, they set up the rotary phones up there, so we was able to call. But I remember at this point too, we was still strong on CDs, like
Yeah.
Yes.
like the Walkman and everything. Like man, I be sitting in my vehicle at night, listening to music. Like that was like the only solace.
And that's all you had. Whatever DVDs you brought, whatever CDs,
Right.
that was it. There was no streaming service. None of that.
Yes.
I saw
Yeah.
Drumline for the first time in Iraq, 2003. I brought that DVD. I said, if I ever get some time, I'm gonna watch this
Wow.
movie, and I saw it for the first time in Iraq.
Wow.
But wow,
I
I
think
mean,
my
just to
I think
hear.
my I think my Iraq movie that I watched 100,000 times was Biker Boys. I think I must have seen that movie 100,000
Oh,
times on the phone.
I remember that movie, Biker Boys.
I was watching comedy. You know what movie I ended up watching that I never wanted to watch? Grandma's Boy.
Who was in
It
that?
was-
Why?
Who was
at
even
this
in it?
point, you like trading movies and DVDs and CDs off. So
Right.
you get in there, you get in your little cut, and you like, I'll never watch that. But then you get to all the end of the stuff you brought. Then it's like, okay, I'll watch it.
Oh, and Tori, there was someone from your unit to this day. I cannot remember his name, but he was pretty dark complected. I knew he was an engineer because of his vehicle that broke down. And remember, like I was telling everybody, we were like your AAA. If we could fix you and get you back on the road, we would. But if not, whoever was driving the vehicle would have to stop and stay with our unit until their vehicle was fixed and they could keep moving to wherever they were going. And so
Hmm.
when I saw the unit and I saw whatever piece of equipment he was driving in, I said, "Hey, do you know Tory? Do you know Henderson?" He was like, "Oh yeah, 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 that's my boy." But whatever his name was, he got stuck. He ended up staying with us for about a week.
I think
But
you
he
talking
told me
about
where you were and where you were heading.
you talking about Frank Crump.
Crump, yep, especially Crump. That was
Yeah,
him. He
Frank
stayed
Crump.
with us
Yeah,
for a few days. So, and Tracy,
yeah.
that's just how big and how small the military is. What are the odds of a soldier that Tory
What are the
that we
odds?
were in the same unit with, his vehicle broke down, he stays with our unit, we fix his vehicle and get him back on the road so he could rejoin the unit. So just that,
Oh,
and knowing that he knew Tory, it made me feel like, okay, I know Tory's all right. I know he's all right. But yeah,
yeah.
this has just been amazing just hearing, how we all came through fam, we all came through the 100, came up fall 97. We all joined the military at some point, different reasons, different motivations. We were all influenced by 9/11. We knew we were deploying, and so we all ended up going to war in 2003, ran into each other, in '03, and just, I think two of us continued on with our career. I think Kareem, did you get out after a few years?
So I was in the reserves, and actually, because I my contract, believe it or not, you know how it is in the military. All contracts are 8 years, whether it's active and inactive time. So I signed a 6x2. So my contract was actually up the February before I went in country, and they extended me. So when I came back, I was out.
Okay, so you had already did all your time. You had did more than
I
what you were
did.
supposed to do.
Yeah, my contract was supposed to be 6 years reserve, 2 years inactive. So I signed up January '97, and my 6 years was technically up, but they extended me. So when I came home in '04, I just ETS'd.
Okay. And
But
ETS
I did
for
want to ask,
civilians means expiration of time in service. It means you've served all your time.
and I did want to ask you a question because I wanted to ask you, how were you able to manage to be in ROTC and in the 100? Because when I first came to FAMU, I came from basic training. I missed pre-drill, and I tried to do ROTC, but for me, I just didn't have the work ethic, right? So, for me being a freshman in 100, me being home away from home for the first time, and trying to do ROTC, it was way too much for me to do, and I dropped out of ROTC. So it'd be interesting to hear, how was your experience balancing the 100 and ROTC, because ROTC in itself is a job. So I don't even
It
know how you were
was.
able to pull that off.
And honestly, Kareem, to this day, when I look back on it, I don't know how I was. How at that age you're just doing. I didn't know that it was even a lot. I just knew I was busy. So just like you said though, 6 a.m. doing formation in the morning at ROTC, doing those runs, running over to FSU, running back, and then a full load of courses throughout the day. 3:35 practice, and then the late practices, the games. The good thing though, ROTC was flexible. They saw the band also as a recruiting tool, so they were
I see.
supportive. They knew I had the practices. Some of them were even former members of the 100, so they had that respect and that support. That went a long way. And I think too, the program itself, because there were ROTC instructors that were also 100 alumni, and so having that community like around me as a cadet, I think it actually helped me adjust better just to being away from home and being a student at FAMU in general. So ROTC actually was what helped me stay grounded and helped me stay enrolled, because anytime I slipped, the instructors, who were also all African American, being at HBCU, that family support, they pulled me to the side and said, "Hey, if you need more help, if you need more time, let us know." And so I think it wasn't just me having the drive to do it. It was also the village that surrounded me through the program that was a big part of what kept me in it. Because Kareem, I remember you too. I remember you coming to the building a few times. I remember we even jogged a couple of times to PT from the ROTC building. We had to run to practice a couple of times.
Yeah, and really for me, I don't know. Maybe I didn't. In hindsight, things work out the way they're supposed to work out. But the conflict for me is I remember some of those ROTC drill classes conflicted with band practice, and
They would.
I wasn't able to get part in. And for me, because the only reason I went to college was to be in the 100. So we didn't really talk about it before, but one of the reasons why my mom reached out to these army recruiters because I didn't really have a college plan. I only wanted to go to FAMU. It was the only school I applied to. And I really was only going to school to be in the band. I had no idea what I wanted to major in. I had no idea what I wanted to do from a career perspective. All I knew is that I wanted to be in the 100, and that's the only reason I'm going to college, and that's the only reason I'm going to FAMU. So when I started having that conflict with ROTC, I said, you know what? The reason I'm here is to be in the 100. I have to make a decision. And really, for me,
Mhm.
I already had my tuition benefit and contract with the National Guard because had I stayed in ROTC, I would have eventually they advised me that I would have avoided my guard contract and transitioned to an army contract. So from a tuition perspective and from a benefits perspective, I was already taken care of. And I said, you know what? I can still be in the National Guard and be in the military and be in the 100. The ROTC commitment is a little bit too much, so I pulled out.
Makes sense. So you were already fully funded.
Yeah, because the way the National Guard worked is that essentially you get your benefits up front, right? Where versus the way the
Right.
Army is usually you get your GI Bill after the fact. But the National Guard, the real recruitment pool was you're getting your money up front and your GI Bill up front from day one.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely like in the military, we call it high op tempo. It's just a short word for saying very, very busy. So you're
Very
right,
busy.
Kareem. It was definitely a balancing act between school, the 100, and the ROTC requirements. But
Yeah.
it made me better. I think it did make me better because when I joined the Army, because I'd already operated at that level for so long, it prepared me for the pace that the Army operated at, full time. So I think if anything,
Mm,
it helped me maintain that ethic and made me successful once I went in full time.
got it.
But yeah, this has been awesome. I mean, and every time we do an episode, I learn even more. Even though we've known each other for so long, just those little pieces that Kareem, you were already there. If we had cell phones, we would have. Who knows what we all would have got
Who
into if
knows?
we actually knew we were all at the same place. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
But yeah, that's awesome to know. We were all in the same place at the same time, and we crossed paths.
Speaking on being senior, how did it? How Tori and I are both what we call enlisted. You can explain that for the civilians. How was it being deployed as a commissioned officer versus what you observed being the enlisted life?
I would say, luckily, being that I deployed active duty, and because back then I was so junior. When you're junior, and when I say junior, meaning newer and younger in the Army, honestly, it was similar to being newly enlisted. And for civilians, commissioned is it's basically just the rank structure in the Army. You have, the commissioned officers who are normally in the commander positions within a unit. And then you have the enlisted ranks, which are what, E1 through E9. No matter what branch you're in, the grades are the same. So you've got
Hmm.
E1 through E9. And so the officer rank is senior to the enlisted rank. And so there are those boundaries, those professional boundaries that you got to maintain, which is why when
Hmm.
people would see Tory say, hey, hey, Carmen, they're looking at like, well, how does he know you? Where does he know you from? What's going on here? So I'd always have to explain that. But being active duty, there were so many officers that we had our own community too. It's like you still had to
Got it.
maintain professional boundaries, but there were so many lieutenants at that rank when I was junior. I had my
Were you
community.
were you were you second lieutenant or first lieutenant in Iraq?
Brand new. I think I was first
Second lieutenant.
lieutenant.
Oh
I
well,
was a
if you're a
first
first
lieutenant in
lieutenant, you're not
'03.
junior. The butter bar is when you're junior, right? So you're first
Right.
lieutenant.
The
You had
butter
some.
bars were the most junior, but by the time we deployed, we were all, I think we had all made first lieutenant by then. So we had a little bit of
Okay.
rank, a little bit of money.
Yeah. Okay.
But it gets lonelier, as to get to your point though, is the higher you go, the lonelier it gets. So, and meaning lonelier, meaning your circle gets smaller. So my last deployment, I've actually over the last 20 years, my most recent deployment was 2018. And so I did deploy as a major. So that was totally different experience than deploying as a lieutenant, when you're just there with all, you've got, 8 or 9, 10 lieutenants with you. So you've got your community, and you've got, other lieutenants in other units. But when it came to being a major, I was the only Black female major on the entire base. I only met
Oh
one other with
wow.
whole deployment. And so it just gets, your circle gets smaller. And so you've got to really find your own community, which
Wow.
again, that's where Fall 97 came in also, because now we've got social media, we've got the phones. And remember, Kareem, you were married during my last deployment. And I remember
Yep.
Marcus, he sent me a ton of pictures of your wedding during my that last deployment in 2018. And so even just that, him sending me them pictures saying, hey, freshman sis, I'm thinking about you. We're at Kareem's wedding. That helped me get me over the hump. It helped me get through the deployment. So it just goes to show, our bonds are still there. They
Yep.
survived the test of time. But yeah, this has been awesome. Just learning about everyone's service, where we've all been, what we've all been through. And so I hope for the larger audience that this spurs conversations too within your class. If you have members within your own classes that have served, or if you know people in your band or even at your HBCU that have went on to serve, ask questions. It never hurts to ask, well, where did you go? What branch did you serve in? Or, what made you want to serve in the Army? So I hope this episode sparks more conversations. And in the future, I look forward to possibly even interviewing other veterans that have served in the 100 from different eras. Well, I think, Tracey, this is,
This has been a very informative episode. Just
it
listening,
has.
these the military stories and the distinctions and the levels that come along with it. I was like, I'm just gonna be quiet and I just want to listen to this. It's just an incredible story about like where our lives go um
The
beyond the
twists and
100,
turns.
and just knowing that you guys were basically making sure I have my rights and freedoms protected here in the States. That's just amazing. There are no words to describe that. I don't take any of our armed forces for granted. Every time I go outside, every time I come inside, every time I go to work, just those simple things. that I know different countries um, are maybe not able to do like how we can. And that freedom, it's a sweet thing, and it's priceless. It's a high price to pay, but it's also priceless as well because you guys at any given time have to pay with your life so that I can be over here in the States just living on and safe and being out in the streets having fun and all that kind of other stuff. It's a sacred time, especially isn't Veterans Day coming up?
Right around the corner.
Veterans Day
Yeah.
is right around the corner. It's such a sacred time. It's more than a day off of work for me. It's more like, let me remember my freshman brothers and sisters who went overseas to just make sure that I have the simple luxuries that I have. So this episode is extra special, definitely, and even delicate in some matters because of the 100 member from Fall '95, Randall, who paid the ultimate, ultimate price. So hats off. There's just no words to say. That'll just be able to give you guys the praise and honor that is due of being a member of one of the armed forces in the United States of America. So let me just tip my hat. Got my little hat on tonight and just tip my hat to you guys. Give you guys a salute as well.
Thank you, freshman sis.
Hey.
So this is Fall 97, Legends of the Fall.